The world of Zelda is filled with all kinds of weird creatures, and there's one fish-like creature that we all know and love. The Zoras, aquatic, blue-skinned humanoid creatures that exist in Hyrule, Labrina, and Termina. But the Zoras have changed a lot throughout the years. Actually, a surprising amount. But how did they change in terms of gameplay, use, and design? What's the difference between the very first Zora and the ones that we see now? Long ago, in the year 1986, the very first Zelda game hit the shelves in Japan. In this game we saw the Zoras for the very first time, but they are quite different compared to nowadays. In The Legend of Zelda, the name of the Zora race was mistranslated as Zolas, and this was later changed to River Zora. They are water-dwelling fish monsters that shoot fireballs at Link, which can only be blocked by a magical shield. They dive into the water and come back up to attack anybody who passes by. So they actually act a lot like Octoroks from Ocarina of Time, for example. But the Octoroks in the first Zelda game actually moved on land instead of water. And later on in the series you will see that these two switched places and took a completely different direction. Now in this game the Zoras are pretty basic, but it was the very first Zelda game after all. The system couldn't handle a lot. But in the game after this, the Zoras started to become different. The Zoras in the second Zelda game behave completely different from the previous ones. They are land-dwelling and heavily armored, even though they still attack by shooting energy balls at Link. This may be because they are actually a different type of Zora. They appear all over Eastern Hyrule, in caves, deserts, roadways and bridges. Primarily walking on all fours, they can stand on their hind legs to shoot at Link. Their armor is strong enough to withstand sword attacks. The fire spell must be used to defeat them. Although they are called Zora in the Japanese release of the game, they were never officially named in the North American version of the game. Now Zelda 2 was very different from the previous game. This one is way harder, and thanks to that the Zoras ended up a bit different. They became some sort of armored tanks, which doesn't really fit. But they also did something else, which was actually a very important step: walking on land. And this will play a big role later on in the series. Now after this everything went back to normal in the series, because in A Link to the Past they moved back to the formula of the first game. In this game they're called Zora spawns, and they appear all over Hyrule. They act almost exactly the same as the Zoras in the original Legend of Zelda, but have a more detailed appearance. And this time they can walk on land and swim in water. Besides this, they started to introduce a bit of a story and personality to them. For the very first time you could talk and interact with them. River Zoras play their biggest role when Link visits the Zora King at the waterfall at the end of Zora's Lake. Although the king aids Link in his quest by selling him flippers, the normal River Zora continue to harass Link throughout the rest of the game. So overall they are still hostile to Link. But the very first step of becoming allies with the Zoras was made. And this would only continue to grow later on in the series. This was also the very first game where we see a Zora leader, showing that they also evolved as a species since they finally have some structure. We also saw a purely evil version of the Zora in the Dark World called Ku. They have one eye and are a greyish red color. Now these versions of the Zora were only a one-time thing, since they were only made for the entire Dark World mechanic, which didn't return in later games. In the next game, Link's Awakening, Zoras also appear as enemies, with the exception of an invisible one who is found in the animal village. But this is nothing special or new, to be honest. It's just weird that he is invisible. The big question is, what happens next to the Zora? How are they going to keep them interesting? And would they work on them even more and make something iconic out of them? Well, in the next game, literally everything changed. The Zoras take a drastic turn from the ones in the earlier games, in which they were called River Zora or Zora Spawn, depending on the game. In those games, they were monstrous and breathed magic fire, while in the 3D games they are blue and scaled, with a more gentle look and more friendly. In Ocarina of Time, Zoras primarily reside in Zora's domain, while some may appear in Lake Hylia. They can exist both in and out of water, but they are best adapted to life in water. There are 2 Zora skills obtained in Ocarina of Time. The Zora skill from the Zoras in Zora's domain is a reward for winning the diving minigame, and the golden skill, a reward for catching a 9-pound fish at the fishing pond. 7 years in the future in this game, The Zoras are trapped within a sheet of ice in the Ice Cavern. They are an extremely proud race, and allow no outsiders to enter their domain unless they have some connection with Hyrule's royal family. So in this game they form a huge part of the plot, since you need to visit them and talk with them in order to get multiple items to finish the game. Their personality is completely different. They're even allies with the humans in this game. They became so much more friendly and involved in the events of the game, as well as the world. The role of the Zoras in Ocarina of Time is based on the role of the Zoras in A Link to the Past, suggesting that the friendly Zoras were originally meant as a reinterpretation of the enemy version. As in A Link to the Past, the Zoras are led by a significantly larger Zora, by the title of King Zora, who provides Link with flippers designed to make water-based terrain accessible to non-Zoras, which a Zora tunic in Ocarina of Time would be similar to. Zora's Lake was once planned to be included, but was possibly converted during production to either Zora's Domain or Zora's Fountain, which are still home to Zoras and provides Hyrule with a water source. All of this started with A Link to the Past, and Nintendo probably saw potential in the Zoras to be a key race in the series. This also happened with the Gorons, since they also got their own area and characters. So the choice was made. The Zoras got a big role and multiple iconic characters together with the Gorons. And so, two of the most famous races in the series were created. Something that also happened during this game is the jump from 2D to 3D, but this didn't really influence the Zoras a lot, since the Zora is now a friendly character and their original role was taken over by the Octorok. The only thing they do now is interact with Link and move around. That's it. But the next game brought something completely new to the series, involving the Zoras and some other races. In Majoras Mask, they remain for the most part exactly the same as in Ocarina of Time, except they reside in Termina. The only unique Zoras are the members of the Indigogos and their manager. Most Zoras are found in Zora Hall located in the Great Bay. But Link is also able to transform into a Zora via the Zora Mask, and this means that the gameplay completely changes. Link behaves and controls like a Zora, especially the swimming is great. It's so much fun, and it was a great feature to the game. So, besides the Zoras becoming involved in the story of the Zelda games, they were also turned into a gameplay mechanic. They became more and more involved and important in the Zelda series, and their part in Majora's Mask is even bigger than it was in Ocarina of Time. But this is different in the 2D Zelda games. In both The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, Zoras appear as enemies, acting exactly as past Zoras. However, there are also Zoras that are similar to the ones in Ocarina of Time in Oracle of Ages. In that game, the more gentle Zoras make a distinction between them and the monstrous ones, claiming that they are river Zoras as opposed to noble sea Zoras. So they kinda split up in two groups, one hostile enemy group and one peaceful, helpful group. And we also see this in the other upcoming 2D Zelda games like Four Swords Adventures and Link Between Worlds. But in 3D Zelda games their roles became bigger and bigger, and they even added something else in the Wind Waker. The real evolution of the Zoras after the world flooded. The Rito. According to the Zelda director Aonuma, the Rito are the evolved form of the Zora. This half-bird, half-human race makes multiple references to the Zora, which further confirms this evolution. Now the reason why they did this is unclear, but maybe this fitted the story better, but it's at least another expansion on the Zora. And in Twilight Princess the Zoras have a more complex society, a bigger main quest in the game, more side quests, and again the swimming from Majora's Mask returns. Examples of this are the new Zora Guards, the big quest where you have to save their prince, or the Zora Tunic that gives you almost the same powers you had in Majora's Mask. This game literally includes everything from the previous games, and they even added more to it. And in A Link Between Worlds, one of the sages is even a Zora, which is a huge role in the game. So even after Twilight Princess, they kept adding more story and more characters to the Zora. But what about Breath of the Wild? Well, we have no idea, but they could easily return, and if they keep following the pattern, they will have an even bigger role. And with a game like Breath of the Wild, literally everything is possible. So they essentially started out with nothing at all. The Zoras were just basic enemies with nothing special about them. But they became one of the most famous and well-known Zelda races in the entire franchise. Hey, you there behind that computer screen or phone or tablet or TV or whatever. You are great, you watched the entire video. Yay, click more videos on screen because, yay, physics, more fun.